the goal here isn't necessarily to remove the risk, it's to increase our confidence in one another as we share those risks and we share that vulnerability. And as a leader, what I encourage leaders to think about is the more you can establish and develop a fabric of trust in your team, the faster you can move.
Welcome to the Audacious Living Podcast, hosted by my man, Audley Stevenson, the Odd Man.
Greetings and salutations. Welcome to the Audacious Living Podcast, where our mission is to empower you to live your best audacious life ever. I'm thrilled to have you here with us today, and I appreciate you taking some time out of your busy day to join us for what promises to be an insightful conversation. Now, just as a ship needs a sturdy anchor to steady amidst the waves, effective leadership relies heavily upon the trust to navigate the turbulent waters of teamwork and collaboration. Now, trust is not just a buzzword. It's a very, very important foundation that accelerates team performance and fosters a more efficient working environment. And who doesn't love that? It's the glue that holds everything together, ensuring that every single person on that team feels valued and seen. Today, we'll dive deep into the components of trust, exploring how it goes beyond mere honesty to encompass vulnerability, empathy, and the courage to openly address risks. Now, I want you to think of vulnerability as that lighthouse, and then I talked about the ship and the waves. This lighthouse guides ships safely to the shore. So when leaders embrace their own vulnerabilities, they acknowledge challenges and empower their teams, transforming potential victimhood into active problem solving. The authenticity is also a key player in this whole dynamic. You see, just like a well-tuned instrument, leaders must align their actions with their stated values and principles in order to create a harmonious workplace where trust can absolutely flourish. Joining me today is Adam Malone. Adam's a great guy. He's a former corporate executive turned leadership consultant who has dedicated his career to helping others cultivate trust within their teams. Adam's mission it's simple, and it's really to transform workplaces into thriving environments where trust is the foundation of collaboration, success. With a lot of time and well over 20 years of experience in operations and leadership, Adam understands the nuances of building resilient teams. He truly believes that every single leader has the potential to create a culture where trust, really of trust, and where they can empower their teams to achieve greatness. So now that we've got you all set, let's turn to our conversation with Adam. Enjoy. Hey, Adam, thank you for joining me here today on the Audacious Living Podcast. I appreciate you for taking the time to be here.
It's my pleasure. Excited for the conversation.
Absolutely. I got to tell you, and truthfully, the topic of leadership is hands down kind of one of my favorite ones. And I think primarily because of the fact that it's sort of all encompassing, right? Like leadership covers such a broad array, and if you go, if you go the average person, just say, hey, tell me your favorite leader, right? Or what do you like, your favorite leadership experience or person that made the biggest difference. Most will probably be able to identify minimum of one, maybe even more. But
Yeah.
and then I also follow up with, okay, so what did you like of what they did, or what was it that stands out
Yeah.
for you? And oftentimes it's these small things, like they listened to
Mm.
me, they heard me, I felt appreciated, things that like all of us can do. And so essentially, that leadership potential really is in every single one of us, and that's kind of what gets me excited about that. And so I really appreciate you here to sort of expand on the conversation, and maybe as a starting point, Adam, I'll get you to introduce yourself to our audience, talk a bit about the work that you do, and what's got you to the point that you're at now.
Sure. So first, I completely agree with you in the idea that most of leadership is really in the small things that we do and not the big, crazy, I'll call them leadery things, which we can talk more about that. Um, my background is I spent 20 years in the corporate world and then got the opportunity to leave the corporate world and uh, to 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 be able to do that is a huge blessing and it allows me to focus on what I found that was the most important and most fulfilling part of being a leader, and that was helping others become better leaders. And so that's why a year ago I left my exec role and started a leadership consultancy, which has morphed a little bit over that time. And now I would niche that down and say I am a trust consultant
Okay.
as opposed to a leadership consultant because everything I do focuses on trust or is like foundational within trust and
Hmm.
not just the broad umbrella of leadership.
And I noticed the term the tenacious operator. I'd love to hear about that and understand that better. That
Yeah.
definitely got my attention, Adam.
Yeah, so my company is called the Tenacious Operator. I have to admit to you, I'm considering a rebrand now.
Okay.
The name of the company came before I had the focus on trust. And so my background is operations, operations leadership, and I believe in building resilient teams and kind of had to think through a title and name for a company as a result. And that morphed into multiple conversations between me and my wife and ChatGPT and some other things. And the Tenacious Operator came. And I agree with you. I love it. I actually love the name. Um, it gets a lot of questions, which is good for a name. I am
Sure.
in this kind of place though of as I have focused more on trust, it doesn't remind people of trust. And so I may come up with a new name. Um, and honestly, I did not realize how long it is to name your company the Tenacious Operator.
Okay.
It's a lot of things for people to type, and not everyone can spell tenacious on the first go. So that creates a bit of an issue that maybe I didn't consider.
Tenacious, audacious. I get it. I get it. I get
Yeah, exactly.
it. So let's start off with trust. Why trust? Why is it important to leaders? Like, why do we focus on it? Why should we care about it?
Yeah. So we should care about trust because there is no aspect of our leadership, of our work with others that isn't connected in some way to trust. And so I'll give you like an example or two of that. Um, the opposite of trust is risk. And when I say opposite, I mean of the same coin,
Okay.
not you either trust people or you have risk. But really, trusting is about the willingness to take a risk. Charles Feltman, the author of the Thin Book of Trust, in his definition of trust, he talks about it's the act of making something you value vulnerable to the actions of others.
Okay.
And it's within his definition is this concept of when I entrust you with something, there is risk that you could do harm to it. There
Yes.
is risk that you may do something that I don't agree with or approve of.
Hmm.
And as a result, the the goal here isn't necessarily to remove the risk, it's to increase our confidence in one another as we share those risks and then we share that vulnerability. And as a leader, what I encourage leaders to think about is the more you can establish and develop a fabric of trust in your team, the faster you can move.
Okay.
A lack of trust requires slower, more deliberate movement. An abundance of trust frees us up to be more efficient with our resources, to do all kinds of things that in a world that's focused on efficiency and all kinds of things about becoming more productive and more profitable and all of those things, I think trust is a force multiplier as opposed to what sometimes people bill soft skills as is soft skills, and they
Mhm.
kind of get like, yeah, those are fine. You need to develop those, but that's not the essence of what we do. And for leaders, leadership and trust are not soft skills. They are the skills. And
Mhm.
so all of that goes back to until I can develop trust with you, I can't give you things that I value, and you can't give me things that you value. And as a result, we'll keep clinging and not growing and not developing and not achieving as much as we can.
Hmm, Interesting, interesting. I'm curious, since um, trust is something that you now made it a focus,
Yeah.
um, versus where you started. Is there something that you've learned about trust since, and why the increased focus on it?
Yeah. So I think part of it for me is as I did more research, I found that more aspects of what I believe in as a leader are foundational aspects of trust. I just never been trained that way, so I didn't know that.
Okay.
And so when you think about trust, often we focus on honesty
Okay.
and not lying,
Okay.
and clearly that's important. But to me, honesty is like table stakes. Like we don't get to do any work together unless we're honest with each other.
Hmm.
And so that I think kind of rings hollow sometimes. You're like, well, I don't lie, so you should trust me. And what really drew me to the topic and helped me think about trust differently was realizing that trust is made up of actually really concrete components that we can train people to shore up and improve and develop a deeper trust by thinking about it as components that are tangible that we can train one another on, that we can test for, and then we can invest in more than just saying, well, as long as you're honest and you keep your commitments, people are going to trust you, and that's not very fulfilling or very helpful.
Mm. I think too the part of trust that I don't think people automatically like so again the honesty is what I think people go to gravitate to first,
Yeah.
but the trust with respects to a belief. So I believe
Yes.
that you as my leader will guide me appropriately, or will take my best interest at heart, or will help the organization as a whole. So it's also a very much a belief as opposed to your honesty, which is more about your character as an individual.
Yes. Yeah. So I love that you reference it as a belief because it is a belief. It is contextual, meaning um, I may trust you to um, be my accountant, but that doesn't mean I'll trust you with my kids. You know, I may trust you to cook dinner for me, but that doesn't mean I trust you to balance my checkbook. Or, you know, there's all these things where trust is highly contextual, and we'll say, people say, well, do you trust someone? You've given me nowhere near enough information to answer the question of, do I trust you? Because you naturally need to say, well, trust you to do what? Do I believe how you're gonna handle that?
Right.
And so, yeah, focusing on it as a belief, I think, is really key.
So I want to go back to you spent some time in the corporate world
Yeah.
and sort of a global sort of global marketplace, if you will. I think it's fair to say.
Mhm.
How did that sort of perspective and how does it influence the work that you do now?
Yeah. So that's really what started it. So first 10 years of that I spent 17 years at one company. The
Mhm.
first 10 years of that I was on the corporate side. I did lots of financial modeling, client relationship, all kinds of things like that. And then about 10 years in, I got an opportunity to move over to the operations. And so that kind of led to, you know, the name the Tenacious Operator kind of comes from this transition to operations almost 8 years ago. In that, I was asked to implement a contract with Apple between the company I was at and Apple, and there was absolutely zero trust between the two companies.
Hmm.
That is kind of the genesis of why I began to believe in trust as something that we need to develop because we weren't making any headway
Gotcha.
in implementing this very important contract between these two companies because both were coming at this from a position of distrust. And until we could move through the logjam of distrust, we weren't going to get the business value that clearly we both believed in. We signed a contract that was a pretty big deal. And so that foundation in thinking through how a lack of trust can erode value, but also what are the things that we can do with one another to establish more firmly root and embrace trust, it's an effort in diligence and and coming as a really honest broker to those relationships when you want to develop trust, especially when they come from a place of distrust. And so that was like with an external party. I had a very small team at that point, and then over time, my team built to where I had about 4,000 people at the end of my executive time there.
Mhm. Mhm.
And then my leadership was very different because now it's about, does the team trust me to lead them? Do I trust the team to do the work well? And so all of that informs, I would say, every aspect of what I do now, including helping with people with third parties, but also especially helping within how do we establish the culture that we want
Right.
based on trust, and how can that add value? Because I, I get the question like, what makes me different from other leadership consultants sometimes.
Yeah. Hmm.
And I would say part of that is one, I don't have an HR background. I have an operations and leadership background.
Right.
I value HR leaders. My HR partners were amongst my most important and valued partners. But I find that people who have an HR background who come into a leadership and consulting focus approach it from one direction as opposed to someone who's been an operator thinks about things a little bit differently and um, understands and embraces that we don't just get to have a great culture. We have to keep the lights on and pay the bills. And so the great
Sure.
culture and the trust has to enable value. And so that's how I think about it is not, well, we just want to have a great culture because, we want everyone to enjoy working here. I think that's important and we do want that. But all of that is in service of running a profitable company that can feed shareholders, take care of customers, and take care of employees. And that comes down to driving results, not just feeling great about, we work in a trusting environment.
Right, right. And so when you talk about the operational background versus the HR, I also think
Yeah.
that um, when you've got that operational lens on, you it allows for empathy. I know empathy is
Mhm.
one of the things that you also talk about. You can understand what it means to
Yeah.
have boots on the ground, so to speak, and be in the trenches with people and understand their pain points and their issues and their concerns. Not that our HR doesn't, but you're just a lot closer to the ground from an operational perspective.
Yes. Well, and so empathy, when I think about those tangible things I said, you can kind of define
Yep.
trust more deeply and understand what develops it. One of the three things is empathy. Um, And we often mistake empathy for emotion. I have
Mhm.
feelings. I know you have feelings, I have feelings, and we're
Sure.
empathetic to one another. That's part of it, but really it's about, do you see me? Do you know me? Do you care about me? And I think a great example of how that can be different when you have an operations background is every decision that gets made in a company, eventually there is a human that's impacted by that decision. They have
Yeah.
more work to do, they have less work to do, they have different work to do. And odds are, too often, the people who made the decision are often multiple steps removed from the actual people who are going to
Right.
be touching boxes and, fingers on keyboards, writing code or whatever that actually do the work. That's why part of developing trust in a team involves empathy, is because even though I may be multiple levels away from someone when I make decisions that impact them, they will trust the work that I do if over time I model that I care about their concerns. I see what they want and need, and I don't just make, capricious decisions of my kind of own will and desire, but instead I'm thinking about them. And leaders that model that can go further faster because the team will say, you know what? I don't know why Audley made this decision, but whenever Audley does things, he always keeps us in mind. And
Hmm.
so maybe this decision does cause more work for us, or maybe this is harder for us, but I know Audley sees and cares about me, so I trust that he's not doing us harm because he didn't care. We feel like this is doing us harm, but that's because he made the best decision he could. that culture, that leader who inspires people to feel that way can get a lot more done than a culture and a leader that now every time they have to go defend themselves and the team's like, oh man, whenever Adam makes decisions, like he doesn't give a rip about us.
Right,
Yeah,
right.
like we're not going to do this. He doesn't understand what he did. And the exact same decision could be made by Audley, the trusted leader, and Adam, the distrusted leader, and the team will react completely differently, even if it was the same decision.
Yeah, yeah. Interesting. That's actually really fascinating. That the same decision, how it's received, and what that speaks to me is a lot of the upfront work that Audley, the leader, has done, right? And there's a
Yes.
tremendous, and that upfront work, again, I talked off the top about, it's the little things, right? That upfront work is exactly those little things, not these huge, sweeping, grandiose acts. So people go, oh my gosh, and they've changed my world. You can change the world with little small things.
Yeah, that's right. And so in the world of trust, an idea there is something called trust signals.
Okay.
So we send signals to one another that establish or help affirm that we can be trusted. And what's interesting is trust signals can be gamed, meaning I can potentially kind of like trick the system a little bit to send a trust signal to make you think I can be trusted, right? But the more expensive a trust signal is, the more difficult that is generally. An expense can be money, but it's usually things like time and attention. So, an example of a really small thing that a leader can do that, in a way, is expensive, but it establishes trust really well, is things as simple as knowing the names of your team members' spouses and children.
Hmm.
And over time, in your one-on-ones, when you're able to say, "My wife's name is Crystal. Hey, Adam, like, how was Crystal this weekend? What'd she and the kids get up to?" Well, I have 5 kids, and so the more you can do that, and then especially like if you go to the trouble to learn all 5 of my kids' names or things like that, some people see that as like that doesn't matter. It's trite, it doesn't impact people's performance. But over time, when a leader does that well, it sends this signal that I care about you, I care about your family, I see you. And because of that, you can trust me
Right.
because I see you as more than a cog in the machine.
Yes.
And my
Yeah.
job is to turn the machine as fast as possible. Because cogs, I don't care about cogs' names and their families. And so you're kind of one or the other. But
Mhm.
it's a relatively easy trust signal in some ways to send, but it actually takes a lot of diligence because the leaders I know that do that the best, sometimes it takes them months to learn people's name, but their families' names, but they're writing them down in their notebook. They're
Mhm.
reviewing them before a one-on-one. They take diligence and effort to look easy, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
that signal is part of what establishes that you
Yeah.
can see me and know me and care about me.
Yeah. Yeah. Being seen is huge, Adam. It really is. And again, that's one of those little things. But like, I mean, when you can see people and acknowledge them for who they are, right, as opposed to this is your number or this you are this cog or this is what you do. It says so much. And um, I think everyone. So as much as I talked at the top about having a good leader, everyone could probably name a not so good leadership experience or example of a bad leader in their mind, if they will. And
Yeah.
I would argue that a lot of that is tied to the fact that they're not being seen or acknowledged or appreciated for who they are, and that's why that's a bad experience.
Yes. Uh, Not being seen, not feeling valued. And where I think some people mess up is they think that all leaders have to do that the same.
Hmm.
Or they kind of hem the idea in too much. And leaders need to be authentic.
Yep.
They need to be who they are. I had a VP one time. I was 3 or 4 levels below him, but we worked together a lot. And I noticed he started asking more about people's weekends and like their birthdays and stuff.
Okay.
And I know him really well and knew like that's not who he is. Like who
Okay.
he is not like knowing when your birthday is. He probably doesn't know that like the birthdays of his children. Not
Okay.
because he doesn't care about them. It's not who he
Yeah.
is. And I asked him about it. He's like, "Yeah, I was in this leadership course and people took this survey about me, and one of the things they said is like, I don't care about them enough. And so I had my assistant add everyone's birthdays to my calendar so that I can go ask them about their birthday. Now, I knew him well enough to know that he was flexing. He was working hard to meet people's expectations. That can be fine as long as it doesn't come across as fake,
That's
right?
right.
And I think we've all known that leader who got the survey that said, you don't care about your people enough, or they don't feel valued enough, and so they started asking people about their weekend. Um, but you could tell they'd ask, but then almost before you could answer, they were like, "Oh, and I need this thing now."
Right.
Like it was like this very very thin veneer of I'm trying to be empathetic and care about you, but really I'm extremely transactional,
Yes. Yes. Yes.
and it actually is one of those things that will undermine trust if you are inauthentic
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
that effort, in that endeavor,
Yeah.
because people will see through that. And so it's how do we learn to flex our style and grow and become better while remaining authentic to who we are?
Well, it
Is hard.
undoes all of your work. It really does.
Yes.
And it only takes one real act to destroy everything you worked hard to build. And so authenticity is a huge in this whole equation for sure.
Yeah. And it's the authenticity. I think where leaders often fail on this topic is they make the best of plans in the light of day. Sun's shining, birds are singing, everything's great. This is the type of leader I'm going to be.
Gotcha.
We all do that. Like we write goals on sunshiny days when there's no big issues hitting us. Those are the times we have time to do that, right? Um, but then, as lots of people will say, in times of stress, what you truly value and what you truly are shines through. And so these leaders will make their plans for the type of leader they're going to be, and they'll do it, while the birds are singing and everything looks great. And then when the client, hits the fan, or when a huge customer escalation happens or something, and now they're in the thick of it to work through it, and it's not the light of day anymore. Can they align their actions to those goals and those values they set forth on the bright sunshiny day? And often inauthenticity shows through when that alignment between words and actions fails, because people see that, and it leads them to a place where they will deem you to be inauthentic or to lack integrity, to lack alignment. And so then when you say, you know what, we're going to make certain that everyone has all the resources they need to get the job done. You're like, yeah, I've heard Adam say this before. It's
Right.
what they said last quarter, and then they
Yeah.
cut
Yeah.
two heads,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
I've heard him say before that we were going to prioritize the work, and then we said yes to every project that came our way. I've been here, I've done this.
Yeah.
In the light of day, that leader said, we're going to prioritize the work and we're not going to say yes to everything. But in the dark of midnight, when they got an email from the CEO that said, big client number two needs us to implement this in 30 days, they responded, we'll get it done. Um, and and so part of what I help leaders and really teams think about is how do we embed and think through in a very realistic way what those really bad days are going to look like so that we can set up our leadership principles and
Hmm.
our guidance in ways that we can live up to when things hit the fan,
Yeah. Yeah.
as opposed to, hey, we can only live up to this when everything is perfect and there's unicorns and rainbows. Um, and that's where you get people feel like they're in this like a schizophrenic culture. Hey, when things are going great, this place is wonderful, but when things get really thick, man, it's just the worst place in the world.
Right.
And
Right.
when you leave people with that feeling, they're just never going to trust what you're doing, and they're always going to kind of have one eye open,
Yeah.
and not be willing to run as fast as they could.
It's funny, as you were talking, I was reminded of a story in my sort of personal life. I remember I'd once worked for the federal government here in Canada, And I, doing a job, and manager called me into the office and said, "Hey, look, we're not really sure what things will look like next quarter. You might want to start looking around and see if there's something else. And it's just I can't guarantee anything, I can't promise anything, and maybe now's the time." And I was like, yeah, hey, I appreciate that, and I did, and I said, it gives me the chance to do what I got to do.
Yeah.
And over the course of the next few months, and I did that. I kind of hustled and networked and all the things that you're supposed to do. And when I'd probably say maybe 2 months after that conversation, I had an opportunity to go in sort of it was an acting sort of role, if you will. Um, but the way it was structured, you because it's an acting role, you've got to get permission, right, from your
Hmm.
managers or everything. And so, I went really excitedly say, "Hey, you know what? This has happened. This is great." And I remember she said to me, "Oh, unfortunately, I can't let you go to that role." And I couldn't understand because I'm like, "Yeah, but you told me nothing was here for me." And
You
she said,
told me
"Oh
to
yeah,
do
yeah,
this.
that was then. We're okay now, right?" So I trusted. Yeah, so we talk about the trust, right?
Mm,
You never came back to me to say to me, "Hey, this crisis, we reverted that, and you're good to go." I had to kind of go through this process. So really, I thought of that
uh,
story, and when you talk about believing in what the messaging is and believing what
yeah.
you're told, and how and I gotta tell you, I didn't have trust for that individual afterwards because I didn't know what
Right.
was the case, right? And so those are the little things. And and look, and I'm not suggesting there was anything willful or malicious or
Oh,
anything
yeah.
like that, right? It was just you didn't follow up, and as a
Yeah.
result, X, Y, and Z happened. And so again, those are the little things that you're talking about that make a big difference.
Yes. Well, I really love the idea that you just mentioned of her telling you and giving you a heads up before things were final. In my opinion, too many companies don't do that.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
think they've undermined trust in a lot of ways with things like reductions in force and layoffs,
yeah.
where they don't give people any warning.
That's right.
Everything's rosy, everything's rosy, everything's rosy,
Hey, I
and then
was super
overnight,
appreciative. I was super,
yeah,
like I
yeah,
was very thankful, appreciative, and I actually, my belief, right,
yeah,
and confidence was elevated. I'm like, wow, this is cool. They didn't have to, and they did, and so it's just that on the other side of it, it's that drop the ball, if you will, right?
right.
So,
Well, you highlight an important concept, which is when leaders make steps towards trust or to develop trust, especially if they are acknowledging a breach of trust, they actually create risk. So think about it as let's say we're having a one-on-one, and you said to me, "Hey Adam, I'm sorry. In yesterday's meeting, I know I came over the top, I spoke over you, and I kind of undermined you a bit in that meeting. I'm working hard. I'm trying to improve that. I want you to know that I acknowledge that. I'm sorry, and I want to be better."
mhm.
Man, like that's the sort of thing that when a leader does that, even before what they've taken steps, they actually have now shown authenticity in a way
Yep.
that it ups our trust. But it actually can increase the trust before the full foundation of that trust is established.
Mhm.
And then tomorrow, if we're in a similar situation and you do it again, you can actually end up in a situation where I now have less trust for you. Our relationship is in a more negative position because you've acknowledged that you know that this isn't good behavior. And then your actions, that alignment discussion, your actions now don't line up to your words.
Mhm.
And so you kind of like it's almost like taking steroids. Like you gave me like my trust like a little steroid shot because you gave me a bunch of authenticity.
Right.
But then your actions never align to that authentic vision. And so now I am in a lower state than I was before you gave me the steroid,
Right.
right?
Right. Right.
And so, what she did, going back to that example, she gave you a little boost in your trust and how you felt about her, but because her long-term actions weren't as aligned to, it seemed like she was super invested in you as a person, but then her long-term actions didn't bear that out when she didn't come back to you, one, and tell you, hey, things are good. You don't have to do this anymore. And two, then she then blocked you from
Right.
making progress against a goal. And so now, like you said, you exited that situation with a lot less trust for her than you started.
Mm,
And
mm,
so I do encourage leaders when they think about, when they acknowledge trust deficits in their team, they want to go work on them or trust deficits within their culture, to be very measured and metered in how they work through that,
right.
because it takes time and attention. And if you try to work on every problem, every trust deficit, every issue all at the same time, you'll often fail and then you'll end up in a worse position. So, how do we build a plan for you and for your culture that creates achievable goals so that we can get momentum where our trust is, even if it's just 1% better every day,
Yep.
that's a lot better than 10% better and 5% worse and 10% better and 5% worse.
Right. Right. Right.
Um,
Right.
so
Right.
how do we build and establish that plan that can maintain a trajectory uh, and keep things moving positively so you don't get into a
Right.
worse position than you started?
And as humans, we don't, so okay, so you do, so in that example again, act A built trust, right? But then,
Yeah.
the next two acts, dissolve that. And as humans, we
Mm.
don't naturally go, yeah, but you know what? Like, although I got screwed over here and I wasn't there, that first time show, like people don't naturally do that, right? We go back to the most recent event that stands for us. And so yeah, I think that's a really and it was a good illustration as you were talking about. I'm like, yeah, I think that's kind of the feeling I had in that example. I also want to talk about how vulnerability plays into the whole leadership framework from your perspective.
Yeah. So we've been talking some about authenticity,
Yeah.
and a key aspect of authenticity is vulnerability. And when I say vulnerability, emotion's a part of it.
Hmm. Is you?
Develop.
Sorry, Adam, you're cutting in and out of there. You started talking about and then you just disappeared on me. You're good now.
Huh. I guess my Wi-Fi bombed. I'm sorry about that.
Oh, no worries, no worries, no worries.
Um, so you asked about vulnerability,
Yeah. Hmm.
and vulnerability plays a huge role in how we develop authenticity.
Hmm.
Um, and so what I like to talk to people about is vulnerability is not just an emotional thing. It is acknowledging the difficulties, the struggles, the hardships that leaders and teams go through in a way that creates positive momentum. So, an example of that, uh, we win a new client. All right. If you, any of your listeners are in any company of any size, they're used to like the excitement of winning a new client.
Right.
And if you're like me, I've been on both sides. I've been on like the client side where you're trying to win the clients, and I've been on the operations side where you're trying to deliver to the clients.
Yeah.
And there's this really interesting kind of cultural thing that can happen where the people who win clients get really excited about the win, but sometimes to the people who are implementing the initiative, it can feel like it just feels like more work. It doesn't feel like a win. You won the client, and then I had 6 months of work. Okay, this I don't love that. And so I've been in that position before as a leader where we want to celebrate something like a client contract, but the team doesn't actually always feel like it's a huge win.
Hmm.
So a great way for a leader to show vulnerability in that time in a way that can build authenticity and empathy is to be open about the difficulty that's going to come because we won this client.
Gotcha.
Don't sugarcoat it. Acknowledge where you see issues. Be open and honest and clear about shortcomings that you think you may have, and bringing your team into that conversation in a healthy way will make it where they believe that, again, you have their best interests at heart, and feed into the trust that you want them to have. So like a vulnerability statement would be, hey guys, I know we just won this contract. Everybody's super excited. I, I feel pretty certain that if you guys are like me, you're looking at the implementation calendar and you're a bit concerned.
Mhm.
I'm concerned too, right? That's like vulnerability statement number one. And then you can say, here, let me help you understand where I have concerns. I have some concerns around, do we have enough development resources? Can our technology stack handle this? And, whatever, do we have enough customer service agents? That's what I'm concerned about. Can you guys share what you may be concerned about also? Right.
Right.
And so now I've been vulnerable, and I have asked them to open up and share their vulnerability as well, what they're concerned about. An unhealthy way to do this is to then do that, and it turns into like a whinge and moan session. And then we go away and we don't actually make anything happen. We don't change anything. Whereas a really effective leader will take those statements of vulnerability and concern,
Mhm.
say thank you, thanks Audley for sharing those two things you're concerned about. Adam, do you have anything? Bob, Sally, what do you have? Okay, great. We're going to write all these down. And now I want us to spend 30 minutes talking about things that we can do to mitigate some of these risks or some of these issues. What's in our control? What's not in our control? Where can we go establish influence? And all of a sudden, a leader has taken this from a, hey, we're all whining about what we're unhappy about, to now, hey, you guys are empowered actually. Like you're not victims. You're empowered to go change your state. So now you're becoming a bit more of a visionary leader. And now, if you want to kind of close that loop of establishing trust, come back to that alignment between words and actions we were talking about.
Mhm.
And now you take that list that your team shared with you about their concerns and potential solutions. That's your marching orders for the next week. You need to work down that list, figure out what you can go solve for the team, and view it as your job to read back out to them. Hey, you guys gave me some marching orders about what you wanted me to go work on, whether it's getting more resources or changing priorities on other projects or whatever. And view it as like, hey, your next staff meeting or whatever, it's your job to read out on your team about how you did against those call them vulnerability initiatives, risk mitigation initiatives, and see it as a full cycle piece of work and not, hey, I'm just going to be vulnerable and open up to you about what I'm concerned about, and that's all we're going to do. There's some place for that.
Yeah.
But if you want to build an empowered, active team, what you have to model for as a leader is when we see a risk, we identify ways to solve them, we try those ways, and then we circle back and we do it again.
Mhm.
And that's how you build empowerment and not a victimhood mentality within a team, especially in my experience in the operations sides of lots of business. The operations team can feel a little bit victimized by what the other parts of the business sell or do. And that's not a helpful mentality. So you have to work against that. And so vulnerability plays a big part of that.
Yeah, no, I certainly can see that, and I think it's the more you embrace that, you can use it to your benefit, and again, I think it ties nicely. We're talking about we spent a lot of time talking about trust, right? But
Mm.
ties nicely to building, establishing, and fortifying that trust, as you alluded to, and so. Yeah, listen, the job for leaders isn't an easy one. There's lots to consider, lots to bear in mind, and there's much to be said about just being mindful of their actions because of what potentially can happen, or maybe things are misconstrued. You meant one thing, you said something else, or like, all of these things are at play here. And so I think the job of leaders is a huge one. And when we bring it back to this podcast, where it allows you, we talk about living that best audacious life, right? It's the leaders, when they set that framework and build it so teams can follow, you're building a dynamic team, And, sky's the limit at that point, and you can live audaciously or perform audacious in your actions. So thank you for that. Adam, this has been great. Like, I really appreciate the insights you've shared today. And I think it's been fantastic and bang on. I really, really appreciate the extended conversation around trust, and with good reason. It is an important one. And so thank you for that. For listeners who want to learn more about you, catch up with you, or connect with you, where can we send them?
Yeah, LinkedIn is the best place to go. Adam Malone speaks. Or if you just go in the search bar and type in Adam Malone, a bearded white guy that's a little pudgy, that's probably me if it's a black and white photo. So click on that and follow. And I publish content on trust and leadership most weekdays, and I love meeting new people. And I've got a newsletter and stuff, but if you just go to LinkedIn, we'll get connected. And I'd love to hear from your listeners. And I love talking to people about how they develop trust in their teams and their cultures.
God, awesome. We'll make sure that all the appropriate contact details are in the show notes below. Like I said, Adam, this has been an absolute pleasure, delight to chat with you. And again, I really appreciate you taking the time to be a guest here on the Audacious Living Podcast.
My pleasure. It's been a joy.
Back we are here on the podcast, during a conversation with Adam, he emphasized that trust isn't just about being honest. It's about understanding the intricate components that make up a trusting relationship. He shared how leaders can use vulnerability as a tool, acknowledging their challenges, and in turn, empowering their teams to tackle problems together. I personally loved how Adam highlighted the importance of authenticity in leadership, stressing that when leaders' actions align with their words, trust can absolutely flourish, enabling teams to thrive. If you want to connect with Adam directly, learn more about his work, you can find him on LinkedIn at Adam Malone. Adam Malone Speaks, actually, where you can find him. He regularly shares valuable insights on trust and leadership, so be sure to reach out. Additionally, Adam is offering a special resource for our listeners, the free downloadable guide on building trust within teams. And you can find that link in the show notes as well below. I want to take this opportunity to thank you for joining us on the Audacious Living Podcast. I hope you found today's conversation as inspiring as I did. If you enjoyed the episode, please take a moment to like, follow, subscribe, and share if you haven't already done so. Your support helps us continue to grow and spread the message of living audaciously. Until next time, remember that living your best audacious life is within reach. Embrace trust, authenticity, and vulnerability, and watch as your world transforms. Stay safe, be kind, show love to one another, and be audacious.
You've been listening to the Audacious Living Podcast, hosted by Audacious Stevenson. If you enjoyed what you heard, be sure to like, subscribe, and share. Until next time, be audacious.